Hello, everyone. Sam here, and we gotta talk about the Unseen Man story. This is our second entry into Mummy May, uh, an event I'm holding that focuses on stories involving mummies throughout the month of May. The Unseen Man story was written by Julian Hawthorne and published in 1893 as part of the Six Cent Sam's collection. Uh, and what the Six Cent Sam's collection was, it was a overarching narrative that was essentially divided into different short stories. The first, I'm going to say half of the narrative is the narrator meeting Six Cent Sam and learning about his strange society of storytellers and starting to ingratiate himself into Six Cent Sam's storyteller society. And the first half is that plot element. But the second half of the story is a section called the Symposium. And the whole point of the Symposium is different stories are told by different characters at this Christmas dinner that Six Cent Sam is putting on. So that's the section of the story we're going to be focusing on because that's where the Unseen Man story is. But to talk about Julian Hawthorne, if that surname sounds familiar, it's because Julian Hawthorne was the son of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was a very famous American novelist. The work most people know Nathaniel Hawthorne for is The Scarlet Letter. So Julian came from a very prestigious writing stock. And Julian was actually very, very much a writer himself. He actually wrote a very broad amount of fiction. He did like detective tales. He did supernatural stories. He did. He actually did not Sword and Planet, but planetary romance. He just did a whole lot of genres. But since many of you probably don't know who Julian Hawthorne is, that's probably all the evidence you need to learn that he was not as popular or renowned as his father was as a writer. But he did put out a large amount of work, and from what I've read, there's a lot of appreciation for him by mystery writers, because Julian Hawthorne did a fair amount of mystery writing. In fact, Six Cent Sam was, as I mentioned earlier, released in 1893, and by this point in Julian Hawthorne's career, he'd actually had a fair amount of success with this character called Inspector Barnes, who was this police inspector who solved all these mysteries, and he apparently wrote at least 5 that I know about, and he was evidently very, very popular. The 5 stories that I know of were written in 1887 to 1888. So Hawthorne had already gotten a popular character. So Six Cent Sam's was sort of an experiment on his part to like tell an overarching narrative, but framed in a way that each chapter was kind of telling its own unique story. Because that's the whole premise of the thing. The narrator meets Six Cent Sam and all his various cohorts who all have these stories to tell. So this was an interesting experiment. I didn't read all of Six Cent Sam's, but I read a few chapters, and yeah, it's a very interesting experiment. I'll probably do a more in-depth review on it sometime in the future. Uh, Now, I actually knew about Julian Hawthorne before this uh, review was done because I've mentioned the magazine Cersova, who's a science fiction fantasy magazine. And a couple of years ago, they did a line of books they called the Classic Series. And they were trying to bring back some like old pulp fiction that had kind of been neglected by time. Stuff that had like fallen out of copyright. No one really bothered to try and put in any new editions. And Julian Hawthorne was the first writer they really focused on. They had the planetary romance I mentioned. It was called the Cosmic Courtship. They had Sarah Was Judith, which was a kind of it was kind of a weird fiction tale because it basically involves possession. There was another one. He had a Hawthorne had a character named Martha Clem. I forgot the title of the story, but the one collection dealt with like a werewolf Martha Clem comes across. And then there was a fourth one, I think, called Doris Dances and the Fires Rekindled. One was kind of this comedic story, and the Fires Rekindled was like an old mystery that involved like reincarnation. So that was what Cersova had done with the Classic Series, and I actually bought all those books when they were being released. Sadly, Cersova didn't continue with the Cersova Classic Series. I've heard two reasons from the main guy who runs Cersova, P. Alexander. First thing I heard was that the Cersova Classics they sold did pretty well, but not amazingly well. It was kind of like, yeah, it wasn't a dud, but it wasn't as successful as P. Alexander had hoped. That's what I heard. And the second reason was that supposedly folks were kind of, since the texts were all in the public domain, there were folks that were kind of coming in and taking Cersova's work and putting it on other books to be purchased. And it was basically a thing of, well, Cersova couldn't really do anything because this was public domain work. And except for like the specific fonts or illustrations that were used in Cersova's editions, wasn't much they could do about that. So I remember there was a tweet P. Alexander put out that said something along the lines of, "Oh, we're never doing a Cersova Classics again. It was a lot of work and a lot of with not much payoff." So, but I'm happy that they did at least put out Julian Hawthorne's work because it was very interesting work, and I'll leave a link to the Cersova Classics line in the description so you guys can check him out. Sadly, Cersova Classics did not have 6 Cent Sam's as one of the republications they were doing. But to be fair, there were also other groups that were doing it. So I actually got my version from the Internet Archive. Somebody uploaded a copy of it there. I'll leave a link to it in the description for anybody who wants to read it. Again, you don't have to worry about copyright. It's long lapsed out of copyright, so feel free to read the 6 Cent Sam and especially this story, the Unseen Man story. So what is the plot of the Unseen Man story? As I mentioned, this particular story is part of the Symposium, which is the I'm saying the second half of Six Cent Sam's, but it's really kind of like the last two thirds. It's a fair amount of text. But the symposium is the frame story. And the idea is that the unnamed narrator is invited by Six Cent Sam to a Christmas dinner party. And there's a bunch of other people who come. They have this great feast. And once they finish the dinner, Sam suggests that they all tell each other stories, because that's part of the gimmick of Six Cent Sam. He always wants to hear stories from his compatriots. So each person takes a turn to tell a story, and the story titles are decided by the storyteller's profession or appearance. For instance, there's one chapter in here called The Captain's Story, and it's called that because the guy telling the story is a ship captain. The one right after this story is The Swarthy Man's Story, and he's called that because the storyteller is a swarthy man. And this tale is called The Unseen Man Story because the teller of this story, the narrator can't quite see him, because where he's seated at the dinner table, the storyteller just is out of his line of sight. He just can't see him right, so he's the unseen man. And the unseen man tells his story, where he relates about how a time he went on a winter trip to Egypt that was recommended to him by his old college roommate. And the unseen man goes to Egypt. He has a great time. He goes down the Nile, sees all the glories of ancient Egypt. A swell time. But he soon meets a man that his former college roommate and his guide have warned him about. And it's a man named Carigliano. And he's this eccentric Frenchman who all the locals kind of treat as a crazy man. They tell the unseen man, no, don't associate with him, he's nuts. But the unseen man is curious about Carigliano, and he decides to join him for this one-on-one conference to just talk about things. And it's there where Carigliano relates how he first came to Egypt, and this shocking experience he had in an ancient tomb 20 years before he met the unseen man. And it's this experience in the tomb that is where the mummy happens to show up. So that's the main basis for the story. So that's the essential setup for this particular tale. I'll first start off with what I didn't like about the story, is because I think it's probably the biggest element of the tale that bugged me. I really did not like the first third of the story, which is the build up to the meeting with Carigliano, because a lot of it kind of feels extraneous. Because the whole thing is that the unseen man does not start in Egypt. He's actually in Greece at the time, and he runs into his roommate, and the roommate tells him, oh yeah, go to this stuff in Egypt, go here during the winter, you'll have a great time, here's who you should meet. Does all that. Then there's several pages of the unseen man seeing the beauty of Egypt and seeing all these wonderful things. And it's after about 12 pages we finally get to see Carigliano. And there was just a lot there that I kind of felt wasn't necessary. It was like this amount of detail, no, we can't just say, oh yeah, my old. You can't just open up saying, oh yeah, my old roommate suggested doing this Egypt trip, so that's where I went. It's oh yeah, I'm gonna talk about how I was in Greece and then I met him and then all the plans I made to go there and every single thing that happened before I actually met Carigliano. And it's just sort of like, yeah, that part really drags because uh, it's just explaining way too many things. It's like Hawthorne was kind of scared that then everybody would be going, well, how did he get to Egypt? And it's like, because he got on a ship there, like. And you can still include the things of the college roommate suggesting it to him, but you don't have to necessarily go all, spell it out with 100,000 words. That's not how long it was, but you get my point. And it also, the whole first section was describing the beauty of Egypt. Again, that part is necessary. You do need to see why the unseen man is fascinated with Egypt, but it just goes on a little too long in my mind. So, yeah, the first third of this story is probably the weakest because it's doing a lot of build up, and a lot of it does not feel necessary. And that kind of ties into the second problem I have with the story, because since there's so much setup, not just of the unseen man going to Egypt, but Carigliano's story, uh, we don't get all that much time to spend in the actual tomb where all the spooky stuff happens. Uh, and because of this, the story has to really escalate fast once Carigliano gets in the tomb, because, well, the story has been sort of dragging on, and we don't really get too much time to spend in this tomb because we've been doing everything else, setting up everything else that really isn't as interesting as what this strange and peculiar tomb is like. It's like Hawthorne is really focusing on everything that's sort of normal and average for a travel story, except for the one weird element of this weird fiction tale, which is the tomb and the mummy that's in it. It's like, yeah, it just kind of feels like the story escalates way too fast, and we don't get nearly enough time in this tomb, which is the main draw of this story. So that kind of irritated me with that element of this story. But now I'll talk about what I think really does work in the story. And this is a slight spoiler, but the thing that I really liked about this story is that it kind of is a neat twist on the mummy story, uh, where there is a mummy, but the mummy is not portrayed as like a bandaged figure lumbering around. The mummy is actually portrayed as a ghost. It's a ghost of an ancient uh, queen of Egypt, and the story also kind of plays with the idea of that. Yeah, she's a ghost that's sticking around uh, because of something that was done in the past that has made it so that the ghost can't pass on to the afterlife. So this was kind of an interesting thing in that this is sort of a mummy's curse story where the mummy is cursed to stay on Earth, but it definitely plays up the ghost element more than the mummy element. So that was kind of an interesting take on a mummy, where the mummy is more of a ghost than, the typical bandaged figure that we usually think of. I also like that there was a strong emphasis on reincarnation. That's a recurring theme in a lot of these older mummy stories. Well, even newer mummy stories kind of highlight this idea of reincarnation, of mummies being these ancient figures who are reborn in the modern day, and it's for that reason that Carigliano finds himself in this situation. I won't say exactly why, but there's a reincarnation element to his being there in the tomb. But I also like how the story emphasizes that reincarnation is kind of a problem, because the big conflict with Carigliano is that something has to be done in this tomb that the ancient being is fine with, but Carigliano himself is not okay with. And this, it kind of deals with this idea of the inherent contradictions of reincarnation, where the past life wants one thing, the current life wants another. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And that was actually something that Julian Hawthorne examined in a similar story. In one of those stories I mentioned, Fires Rekindled. And that story also dealt with reincarnated lovers from ancient Egypt that find themselves in the modern day. So this was a theme that Julian Hawthorne seemed to really be interested in. I also really liked a lot of the characters in this story. Starting with the narrator, the unseen man, he actually has a very cool character development that's not explicit but very subtle. Because he starts off the story just being a typical tourist. He wants to go to Egypt to see all these nice sights and, take in the scenery. And he's exploiting Egypt for his own amusement, essentially. But the whole point of the story is that as he meets Carigliano and learns his story, he kind of starts to see the impact that a foreign land can have on a person when they fall too much in love with it. And even the ending scene of the story is the unseen man meeting back up with his old college roommate, and the college roommate is still kind of laughing about Carigliano because the roommate had known him before and he just thought he was an amusing nut job. But the unseen man is kind of going, and he doesn't find it amusing because he saw how much Egypt affected Carigliano. So there's sort of this interesting character development where the unseen man sort of realizes the power of Egypt and how it can destroy a person. And he doesn't find that very amusing by the end of the adventure. And kind of like the last story I talked about, the Edgar Allan Poe story, Some Words of a Mummy, I said in that story that it sort of was critiquing the romanticization of Egypt. In that story, it was kind of a thing of people had romanticized Egypt for so long that when the mummy in that story woke up and revealed that, oh yeah, Egypt was way better than modern America, all the modern men went nuts and kept trying to prove, no, we're better than Egyptians. That was sort of the critique of Egyptian romanticization there. But here, the critique of romanticization of Egypt kind of comes with this idea of how romance with a person or place can cost your heart and soul. And that's a very literal thing in this story. The heart and soul are very literal things in this story. You'll understand if you read this, but it's kind of the idea of the romanticization of Egypt is actually very self-destructive. It's not going to end well with you. End well for you if you obsess too much over it. So that's kind of interesting, the fact that even the Edgar Allan Poe story and this story that were written in the 1800s were already kind of looking at the romance of Egypt with somewhat of a critical eye. So that's a very cool element of this story. And going back to the characters, I really like Caragliano as a character because he sort of has lost himself to this obsession with the queen in the tomb. The queen's name is Queen Amenuhet. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And he's just kind of fixated on her from that day he saw her in the tomb. And one of the themes of the story is that he's been torturing himself for all the 20 years since he last stepped in her tomb, because he had this moment of cowardice in the tomb. I'm not going to say over what, but there was something that had to be done he decided he wasn't going to do. And it's sort of mentally destroyed him. So he's a very fascinating character in that respect. And I also really like how he actually kind of parallels the Unseen Man with his character arc, because Caragliano was just like the Unseen Man at one point. He was not from Egypt. He was a French expedition member who had come to record things about Egypt, record the hieroglyphics and things like that. But he fell too in love with Egypt, and that love led him to Queen Amenuhet, and that love has really done a number on his psyche. So it's interesting how it kind of parallels the Unseen Man, and you can sort of look at Caragliano as sort of a warning to the Unseen Man about how, well, this is what happens if you fall too in love with something. So that's a very cool element to his character. And another thing I really like about Caragliano is that there's this ambiguity over whether Caragliano really did get accosted by Queen Amenuhet's spirit in that tomb, or if he's just crazy. And the story kind of plays it ambiguously, because there's some evidence to show that, well, yeah, he might just be crazy and making it up, people can go crazy for different reasons. But there's also some evidence to show, well, there's some things that were going on that you kind of go, well, that makes more sense if it was supernatural. So I actually like the ambiguity. Ambiguity about supernatural things can be kind of hit or miss for me personally, because sometimes it just kind of comes like a cop-out, like the writer doesn't want to openly go into supernatural things. And it can be very annoying if the writer tries to make this ambiguous situation, but they have to really stretch the narrative in order to justify why it could or could not be possibly supernatural or possibly not. It can be very annoying. But here I think it works because it plays into that idea of obsession. And what's worse, obsession over something that never existed, or obsession over something that does exist, but you just can't get, or you can get for a very steep price. So that was a very cool element of the story. And I also like how Caragliano's final fate is ambiguous as well. Because it's basically implied that either something happened to him, but we're not quite sure what. So that was kind of a cool element for him. Excuse me. Uh, I This is a bit of a spoiler, but I have to spoil a little bit of this to talk about this character. Queen Amenuhet, who is the mummy spirit in the tomb. She doesn't have a huge amount of characterization, but I think she is pretty good as a character. Because she explains to Caragliano, she goes, look, I've been stuck in the afterlife and in this tomb for thousands of years. And she really wants to get out. And in order to get out, Caragliano has to give her something. But she doesn't say it in like this mean-spirited, you will give me the thing. She just kind of goes, hey, look, I need what you've got. I've been doing this for thousands of years. Would you be a good sport and give what is needed? And she's... when Caragliano has his moment of cowardice, she doesn't like get angry or scream or do anything. She just kind of goes, It's like, it's almost a non-reaction. Like, alright, guess he's doing that. So, she is kind of this interesting character who has just existed for so long, for thousands of years, that she's just not really fazed by anything. So that's kind of a cool character element. And the fact that she's asking for really big things, things that are not going to be fun to give, but she doesn't really see it as a problem because her conception of time has spread so long that she can't really conceptualize why someone would be upset for a quick few moments of pain when eternity is open to you once that happens. So it's kind of that interesting theme of how the dilation of time has kind of changed her perspective. And and speaking of time, one of the things about the forgotten tomb that Caragliano finds himself in is that there's this great sense of both dread and wonder in the tomb, where everything about the tomb is speaking of the fact that, it's a tomb. It is not a good place to be if you are alive. But there's also kind of this interesting thing where the images on the wall are acting like ghosts, and they're everything in the tomb is like slow moving because time is somehow affected in this tomb, and things don't move as fast as they do in reality because time has just become so flexible to the Egyptians. So that was kind of a cool element. And the emphasis on time is another thing I thought that was really interesting because one of the things that I noticed is that the unseen man throughout the first half of the story really has a fixation on time because he's plotting his travels. He has the exact dates he wants to go, the exact places he wants to go. Everything's programmed to the day. But then you have Caragliano's story where it's revealed that the ancient Egyptians have no real sense of time, or at the very least have a broader conception of it because they have such a long afterlife and they've existed for thousands of years that, an entire lifetime for a regular person is like a blink of an eye to them. So there's this real interesting emphasis on time and how it can affect perception, and how how again obsessing over time can become a bit of an issue. So that was a very cool element of the story. So the final ranking. I rank my readings based on a 5-star system, 0 out of 5 being the worst, 5 out of 5 being the best. And I would say that this story is a solid 4 out of 5 stars, which is a good story in my mind. Uh, like I said, that beginning is probably the weakest element. It's a little too sluggish. It has a lot of extraneous detail. And I think that does kind of rob it of a star because it's that thing of if you don't if you're not hooked by that first third, you may not be all that interested in where the story's going. But aside from that, I think the rest of the story works really well, particularly as a mummy horror story, because I'm being kind of vague about what happens in the tomb. But once you know what happens, yeah, it's not a pleasant experience for Carigliano. And like I said earlier, I really like this idea of sort of combining a mummy story and a ghost story, uh, because mummies are sort of uh, ghosts of the past in their own sense. So I just really like that idea of sort of combining two things that are normally fairly separate in horror fiction and sort of mashing them together. And I think what really carries it for me are the characters, because there's just this really good character study with Carigliano and the Unseen Man, sort of showing how they end up, how one has succumbed to the romance of Egypt, and the Unseen Man might have an opportunity to escape if he doesn't fall too deep into its charms. So that was a very effective element of the story I really liked. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this for any mummy fans who are into spooky mummy stories. I'd actually recommend this to ghost story fans because I think they would really enjoy this too. And if you're looking for Julian Hawthorne's work, you can do this story, Six and Sam's, or you can check out his other works. Again, I would check out Cersova's stuff. They're pretty. They did a really good editions of his work, so definitely check those out if you want to check out Julian Hawthorne. Any inspiration? For those that don't know, I am a working writer, and I really like talking about at the end of these stories whether these stories and reviews I've done, whether they've inspired me to look at look at them through a creative lens and see if they've sparked any creative ideas in my own writing. Uh, I think the thing that really attracts me creatively to this story is the idea of combining two horror monsters into one. Uh, here it's a ghost and a mummy. Uh, as a huge werewolf fan, the first idea I thought of combining two monsters after reading this was a werewolf mummy. I don't know how good that would work, but there might be something there, might be worth looking into. Might have to be more of a comedic story, but maybe I could make it work as a serious one. Uh, I guess the other possible idea is a dark romance with a ghost, which is not that original. I know there's been plenty of paranormal romances with ghosts, so that idea is a little more cliche, but maybe something could come out of it. So, yeah, we'll see. All right, well, that is all I have for this story. Like I said, I'll probably do a full review of Six Cent Sam's sometime in the future. Probably not next month or the month after, but sometime this year. And yeah, that'll be my main fixation at some point. But yeah, that is all I have to say about the Unseen Man story. Check it out if you want to. Like I said, I left a link for it in the description. And check out Julian Hawthorne's other works. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. And thank you very much for watching. All right. Bye.